All right, folks, it is 8 o'clock Eastern Time. That means it is time to get going. So I don't know if you know who Josh is, but he is an awesome Meteor expert, Meteor.js that is, and he's going to show us some stuff about building applications with Cordova, which is mobile technology, MongoDB, and Meteor.js. He also hosts a podcast about Meteor, and I'm sure he's going to tell us all about that. So, Josh, go ahead and take it away. I'm going to mute unless there's a problem. So, or if you need me to intervene. So,
Sure.
just speak up if you need my help, and if something goes wrong, then I will.
Okay, sounds good. And so I have two screens. So like, when you see me, I'll be looking here at my main screen, the one I'll share with you guys. So who am I? I'm Josh Owens, started as a Rubyist. Um, did that for, 9 years, started dabbling in Backbone, a little bit of Angular, never really tried Ember, but then this Meteor thing came along and was super impressed with it, similar to how Rails was for me. So you can find me on Twitter /Josh Owens, GitHub /Queso. The code for today will actually be at github.com/Meteor Club /City Forks, but I'll mention that again. I also run like a Meteor Club. It's just we've got a chat room, and I send out weekly newsletters, and it's just other interesting things I'm doing. And then I do the Meteor podcast, and then also run Crater, which is like the main kind of news site with Meteor. It's running on Telescope, which is a Meteor app. So what is Meteor? If you're not familiar with it, I don't know. Can you guys see my slides okay? I assume yes.
Yeah, they look good.
Okay, all right, awesome. Um, so Meteor is a platform. It's similar to Rails, right? So Rails is a framework, but Meteor actually takes it a little bit further. Um, the idea that it's a platform is that it integrates deeper than other kind of frameworks. It's actually gluing together the front end and the back end, and you get a similar API, on the client and the server. So it makes it really nice to develop things. And I guess I should have put the slide in here. I'll before we get going, I'll share my screen, and I'll show you kind of a layout of what it looks like. Um, but real quick, before we get into that, um, today we'll be using leaflet underscore and ratchet on top of um, Meteor, and then the Cordova stuff that's built into Meteor. We'll be using those libraries. And then Mongo is also part of that as well. So whenever you start a Meteor server, you get, like, it starts a Mongo server alongside of it. So if you start on port 3000, you get a local instance of Mongo running on port 3001. So I think that's most of the technology. So Ratchet's if you haven't seen it, it's just a CSS framework for doing mobile apps. I've actually switched to using Ionic. I haven't switched this project yet, but someone has a port of Ionic that works with Meteor, and it seems to be pretty good. So been using that lately. So I guess let me switch to sharing my desktop. I can figure out how to do that.
It's the plus button at the top in the tabs.
Yeah.
There you go.
Bear with me here while it spins up. So here's the little infographic I mentioned before. Kind of what makes up the Meteor platform. So when you run the Meteor command, it's actually spinning up a node server, and that node server is going to serve up your client for you. So you can see, when we get to the end, we'll do like a Meteor Run iOS, and it'll spit out a Cordova app, and it'll run the Node app. But what's happening under the covers is starting MongoDB, it's starting the Node server. Obviously, those two are wired up to communicate with each other for you automatically. You got some other libraries like fibers that are wrapped around Node, and then custom libraries that they've created like LiveQuery, which does the reactiveness on your database queries. And then you've got this pipe kind of sitting between the web client and the server, and it's called DDP. It's just it's a protocol that uses web sockets to communicate back and forth. I think it stands for like Dynamic Data Protocol or something like that. And they use eJSON to serialize the data and ship it over the DDP pipe there. So, and it's just basic JSON, and they've extended it to have like date types, and there's a couple other types that they've added to make it work better for serialization. And then on the web, you've got a couple things going on. You've got Blaze, which is kind of like React. You've got Spacebars, which is an updated version of Handlebars that's fully reactive. You've got Tracker, which handles all the calculations for figuring out whenever something reactive needs to be updated. And then you've got Mini Mongo, which is a client-side in-memory replication of your Mongo database. So whenever data is shipped over DDP, Mini Mongo is what's storing it on the front end, and it gives you that same kind of API that you're using on the back end. And then they're also doing some calculations behind the scenes. So whenever the code changes, it's looking at that calculation and then figuring out like, hey, you need to update, and they call that hot code push or hot code reload. So, all right, let's get into it. Just say Meteor create city forks. We're just going to I wanted to do something kind of location based and utilizing maps and that kind of thing. So we're going to be getting into like 2D indexing with Mongo and that kind of thing. So I thought maybe a fun way would be, it started as an Urban Spoon kind of knockoff, so I called it City Forks. But I don't know, we don't quite get all the way with it. So City Forks. So when you get started, you just say Meteor Run, like I mentioned before. You get 3 files when you do create, just CSS, HTML, and a small JavaScript file. And it basically it's here to show you kind of what reactivity looks like. So if you guys had this open as well, you would see that number counting up as I'm clicking on it. And it's pretty basic. Can you guys see my text okay?
Looks fine.
Okay, awesome.
Getting a lot of yeses in the chat room.
Awesome. All right, so they just use session right here, which is a little different than session maybe from Railsland or elsewhere you might have seen it. It's actually specific to this person that's connected, and it's there for the UI. So we're storing kind of like a UI variable, but it doesn't like store it in a cookie or anything. There are packages you can install that will let you use local storage to store the stuff if you want. But this is all global, but per user. So, and it's fully reactive, so that is kind of a nice thing. Anyway, we don't really care about any of this stuff. City Forks. Just get rid of all of it. What we did get, and why I did run the command, was to get all this. So there's a lot of stuff in here. This is actually the app that got built, and we're hitting when we hit port 3000. the files we do care about, you get packages, platforms. So that'll come into play once we start adding the Cordova stuff. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. Close that, sorry. Meteor add platform iOS. So I already have Xcode installed. It's kind of important if you want to do the iOS stuff. It will only work on a Mac, just FYI. We'll use that for today. But you can just say Meteor add platform Android, and it'll download and install everything it needs to run. And then if we check this again, you'll see it's got iOS inside the file now. Seriously. There we go. Very distracting, sorry. And then we get a few other files in here. So releases just tells you what release you're using. And then if you are familiar with, like there's the packages, kind of like a gem file. You're familiar with that. And then the versions is similar to the gemfile.lock. So it's just specifying all the stuff that got installed as far as dependencies and regular packages and all that. So, all right. So we'll get going. We'll add a few packages. So we'll do Meteor add, and then I'll just show you Atmosphere real quick. This is the package server, kind of like when you go to Ruby Gems or something like that. It shows you all the packages you can install using Meteor add. You can click on one. It's got a little spark graph. It shows you this has been installed in 268 different apps. You click on GitHub, you can see things that are related, all the releases. Yeah, good stuff. And then they rank everything too based on number of stars it has on the website and then like number of releases. It's really interesting. Good way to find stuff. All right. So we want to add Iron Router. Pretty core for every application. I would think at some point this might actually become part of the core Meteor. I don't know. And then the other one we want is PCJ, oops, J2 ratchet. So the great thing about the package system is you can bring a lot of files along with it. So someone has already packaged up Ratchet, and it's bringing all those CSS files for me. And so I can just start utilizing them right out of the box. The other one we'll add is just HTTP, because we're going to hit Google's API to make calls and fetch data. So it's an easy way to kind of work with that. All right. Oops. I usually make a client folder, server folder. I make a collections folder. And when it comes to Meteor, anything you put in the client folder is only going to be shipped to the client. Anything you put in the server is only going to go to the server. Everything else will go to both environments. So like collections will actually get loaded in both spots. So it's a nice way to share code between the front end and back end. I usually make a lib. This is a special directory. I'd highly recommend, spending a few minutes looking at docs.meteor.com. They do a great job. And they talk about structuring your application, and they talk a lot about this stuff. In particular, they talk about lib. But basically, it just gets loaded first. That's why you tend to put stuff there. Let's see, do you need anything else? They also have tests, which is basically just ignored by the app, but then you can start adding tests if you wanted to. I think that's enough to get us going. Clients, views. So we'll just make an app layout .html. Guess we'll type it out. All right. So we need leaflet. I'm just going to put that in the head here. And it's smart enough to figure out and like concatenate anything that's put in head across any of the templates. So, but to me, it makes sense to just kind of keep it with my layout. So the templating system is similar to, like I mentioned, handlebars. You just make HTML templates. We'll call this one app layout. Then we'll have a header. So that's just, we're just telling it to render in a partial right there or another template right there. We're going to yield right here. So again, if you're familiar with Rails, this is gonna look kind of similar. And then we'll yield a footer into there. And then let's see. So we can make our header client. Use header. HTML. Here comes a train. I live near tracks, so you'll hear it. So template. Use header. This is where we start to get into Ratchet. So if you do a search, you can kind of look at the docs if you want to follow along. We'll just do a header with a class of bar and bar nav. Each one in there. Class of title. City Forks. All right. We can make our home view. This is going to get our map on the page for us. We'll start tying this together in a minute with Iron Router, and it'll probably make a little more sense. Div class equals content. We need to put the map in here. Div map style. I'm lazy. I just put the height right in here. Hopefully that'll make it full screen for us. All right, and then we go lib router.js. And so they've got great docs as well. So if you go to the Iron Router repo, you can read the Getting Started guide. They do a great job. We just pass it a JavaScript object here, and we set layout template the app layout. That's the one we made before. So we're just the router.configure is global. So we're just telling it like, hey, make this the global layout. And then we can say router.route. We'll catch the anything that hits the home page. Then we just run a function here. We'll say this.render. We'll tell it to render the home template that I created already. And then we just give it an object here. And the object, we want to set the data. For now, I'm just gonna return true right here. We don't need to do much right now. There we go. JS hint broken at me. And so let's see what that looks like. What do we got? Reload. Oops. Guess we gotta run it. Meteor Run. Maybe not get back yet. Maybe we don't get back. The other thing we're gonna want package-wise is the Cordova geolocation package. So we can detect people's locations, which we'll start using here in a second. So that was kind of, I don't know, probably all the boring stuff out of the way. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat room before we move on. Yeah, I set the height on the content. Could be that I haven't initialized the map yet. I think that's actually the problem. Which we'll do right now. There we go. Get started. I have already built this app, like I mentioned before. So you go to GitHub, Meteor Club / City Forks. There's a repo up here with 4 commits, and this is the same stuff that we're going over. Okay. Here we go. So let's get into the Cordova stuff a little more. We'll make a file called client Cordova.js. Basically, when the client app starts, oops, window was the wrong size. When the client app starts, we want to figure out the location of the client that started up. And so we want to use that geolocation package that I just added. So we can do meteor.startup. Basically, this is going to run. This is kind of like your jQuery ready on ready function or something. This is going to run as soon as Meteor's up and running and ready to go. And so we want to call navigator dot geolocation dot get current position, and then we're just going to call a function right there when it's done. And so we just need to make a named function right here. Position, what it's going to get. And so we're going to use that session that I mentioned before. We'll just call it location for now. And then we'll just set the entire position object there. And Yeah, let's just do that and see where we get. And so you can see here, like I'm already getting the, geolocation stuff. I'd already accepted it, so I just cleared it real quick, and you can see it now pops and says like, can we use the location? So we'll say allow. And then if we come over here, we can do a session get on the location, and you can see that object that we've stored now. It's got coordinates with our latitude and longitude on it. So the great thing is, since we're using it from Cordova, this works in the browser like we want, and it's also going to work automatically in the Android or iOS environments. So we kind of get both those, I guess all three of those for cheap. All right. So next, I'm going to create. We'll start shoving places into the database so that we'll have something to show with the map once we get it working. So we'll create a Mongo collection, and then we'll create a Meteor method, and we'll call that Meteor method whenever we get a location and go fetch nearby food places. So this will be a good bit of code here. Collections, places.js. So we just save this off into the global namespace. So it'll be window, basically, in the client, or root in Node. So new Mongo collection, and then we just tell it what we want the collection to be named in the actual Mongo server. So we'll just keep it the same, just places. And then the other thing is we're going to use a method here. Meteor methods are just like RPC calls between the client and server, so it's the other piece of DDP. So I can make a call and say like, hey server, do this thing, and it'll go do it, and then you can have it return something if you want. So what we'll do, we'll just create one called fetch nearby locations. It'll take some coordinates. And this is gonna go to both the client and the server. And the reason you usually want to do that is you can do latency compensation, so you can kind of like fake out little bits of the client side code, and it'll look like something's happened, and then it runs on the client, and then it'll run again on the server. And if everything's accepted on the server, then everything will update properly for everyone else. But for our case, we actually I like to keep this together, like the collection and the methods that modify those collections. So we're going to put it here, but we only want it to run on the server. So we can say meteor.isServer, which will return true when it's the server, false when it's not. Let's see, we want to make an HTTP call here. Actually, for the sake of saving time, I think it might just make sense to paste this in and maybe talk about it. Oops. So basically on line 6 here, we're going to call out to Google. We're going to give it our latitude and longitude. We're going to tell it we want types of food. There's a key kind of in over here to the right. We'll just console log the results that we get back. Didn't paste right. There we go. That looks better. So we'll just console log those results so we can see them in the server or the console output on the server. And then we're going to loop over those results. And, we'll look at this structure when this console log runs. But basically, line 8 and 9, we're just trying to get the results ready. So when you're doing Mongo indexing, 2D indexing, you need to have a GeoJSON compatible object, and so that's what's going on here. We're basically glomming on the GeoJSON onto the location results that we're getting. So it's just type point, the coordinates. You have to actually give it longitude, then latitude, which I don't know, that's like backwards from how I learned it in school. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and insert, or we're going to upsert the entire location into the database we're using the Google API ID as kind of our key for this particular query. So let's save this. JS hint is hating all over it. There we go. What we can do now is right here, where we set our session, we can also make the call to that method. So this is only going to run on the client. We just do a meteor.call. Again, this is just kind of like RPC, nearby locations. And we'll just give it position.chords. If you haven't seen it, I use a little app called RoboMongo. It's a nice way to visually see what's going on in your database here. So you can see we've got places. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And back over here. Reload. And now you can see in the console, we're like getting a bunch of stuff spit out here. Come back over to RoboMongo. We're fine. We got 10 results, and you can see like this Gabby's Cafe is literally like half a mile from my house. So I can walk down there. Pastry shop that's right across the street. The farmer's market, which is only there temporarily, but so we're getting like these are all relevant to right where I live. And that is exactly what we want. So let's see. Any questions on that section before I move on?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat.
Can you read it to me while I'm like doing this?
Yep. Just wondering, should we always write that meteor.isServer question mark? Are there any easier ways to separate client and server parts?
The easiest way is to use those folders that I had mentioned. So hold on, I'll type tree here in a second. Get applications going into the DB. The easiest way is to either put the code in the client or the server. But again, for me, it's more of a discipline of keeping logical code together. That's what has me put like my Meteor methods next to the main kind of collection that it's going to be modifying. Generally, I find Meteor methods are written because you want to do some kind of like database updating or something like that. You can do it from, you can allow the client to do it if you want, but there's a lot of debate about like the security of that, and they've got these allow and deny rules, and if you make a bunch of them, it's sometimes hard to figure out like what kind of interaction, like if this user's an admin and you're checking like multiple if then statements, like I don't know, it can get messy. So a lot of people would just use a Meteor method and just stick to that as the way that they update the database. So that's why I keep it there. And then the other nice thing is usually you do want you do want that latency compensation, but here we don't, because we have no idea what's going to come back, so we can't even fake that out. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's messy, but I'm familiar with the code maybe. The biggest thing I think that's maybe weird for people when they come into Meteor is like you can pretty much shove files anywhere. So I would say like when you're getting started with a Meteor app, it's probably a good idea to look at Discover Meteor, the book. Like they suggest a layout. I've got a blog post that suggests layouts that I tend to follow. I've even changed since that blog post, but just stick to a standard and try to document it because gosh, it's a pain when someone doesn't name their files right, or you have no idea where you're looking for code. Nobody wants to be grepping. All right, next bit of code. So now I think the key thing here is we want to do like a 2D index. And this is a pretty simple one-liner, but this one actually took me a while to figure out. So server index.js. So we just call places underscore ensure index. This is the underscore denotes that it's a private method for Meteor. I had a discussion with the Meteor development group, like why is this still private? This should have been part of 1.0 release. They said they just didn't get around to documenting it, and so they kept it private for now. But it's not going to change from what they've told me, so should be able to use it without too much worry. And with Mongo, we just want to do a 2D sphere. So we should be able to do like a box query, basically. The other thing that I want to do now is just show you real quick what happens by default. So if I do a places.find right here, I gotta do a fetch on that. You can see we're already getting objects right into the front end, and that's actually not desired behavior. So by default, Meteor gives you some crutches called insecure and auto publish. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those, and then we'll create a quick publication so you can see what that looks like. But you just do Meteor remove auto publish. Basically, it's taking the entire database and pushing it over DDP. So if you have large data sets, the first time you use it, like that may be a little alarming because you're getting all this data shoved across the wire. But it takes like 20, 30,000 records before it's kind of noticeable in the client. All right, so let's make a publication. So we just call meteor.publish, and then you give it a name. We'll just call it nearby places. And we're going to get the coordinates that we're going to search around. They're going to come from the map. So the map will give us a bottom left and the top right. That's what we need to make a box. And so if we don't have the bottom left or the top right for some reason, we're just going to return nothing. If we do have a bottom left and the top right, we're going to do a search for our GeoJSON point. We want to do, it's a geo within query. Oh, yeah. give it a box here. Which just consists of the bottom left and the top right. Okay. And so now we can go and start adding some code to Iron Router to make that data available to us. What we can do, let's see, lib router. Change all this syntax. So just say template home right here. I need to wait on function. So we can tell it to wait before rendering our template for some data. And so this is where we do our subscribe. We're going to subscribe to that publication. Places. The cool thing about this is all reactive. So we can do like a session get bottom left and a session get top right. And so once we get the map going, we'll just set the bottom left and top right anytime the map is changing. And these variables will update and this subscription will change. And you know, it'll rerun the subscription and tell the publication like, hey, we've got a different box, go get me different data. So it's kind of nice. And then our data. We want to return places.find. So basically, our template context, this is kind of like, I guess, the controller in Rails land. Like, we're going to set up the variables that are available to the template, and we're just going to make all the places available that we brought over. Wow, I totally did not like that. I did not like that.
You got 15 minutes left, Josh.
Okay. Getting close. I don't know. Is it crashing? Yeah, 1.7. I'm just gonna semicolon somewhere. Oh wait. That's good. I have no idea what my typo is at. Oh, I'm just passing an object instead of running a function. That's why it's weird now on me. There we go. There we go. No more JS errors. All right. Now the last bit of code that's going to tie this all together for us. We're going to go to client. So we already made that home.js that had the map div in it. So I always name my JS files the same as the template files. So like home.html, I'm going to make a home.js here in the client views. What we can do is we can grab on. Like anytime this is rendered, we can run this function right here. This is a callback that we get that we're able to do stuff on. And I mentioned before that tracker auto run. So basically, this is just a fancy way to say anytime code in here changes, we want to rerun this guy, like everything that's inside of here. So since we're using like session variables and stuff, we want to rerun this entire function anytime any of those variables change. And so if we have a session location, that's what we saved off earlier, and we're going to run a bunch of stuff. Actually gonna probably copy all this too. We'll copy in sections here and go over it. Excuse me. All right. So we're going to grab the latitude and longitude, and I'm going to save them off because we're going to work with it a couple times through here. And then this is leaflet syntax right here on line 6. We're just going to tell leaflet like, hey, we've got a map. Here's the name of the ID of the div. Set the view to be our latitude and longitude. We want a zoom level of 15. And then with leaflet, you have to supply your own mapping tiles. So this is just the default OpenStreetMaps, I believe it is. Yeah, OpenStreetMap. Tiles. So we'll use those, and then we have to put the attribution on there as well. And then basically we're saying add the tiles to the map. And so if we save this guy, we should start seeing our map. And you can see, since we centered it on the geolocation point that we had, my house is right here. You see, like, these are the train tracks that run through my backyard. This is the street in front of me, and my house is like right where the hand is. So kind of works the way we wanted. The other thing is, like, it's gonna pause for a second. That's because we're waiting for that location. So it's got to get the geolocation point set before it's going to render the map. I don't know. I haven't decided if that's a bug or a feature. All right. So the next bit of code, we want to get some places filling in here. So we need to set that bottom left and top right. So we just call it get bounds on the map, and it's going to give us those corners. We can ask it for the southwest and northeast to get that, and we're just going to ask for the latitude and longitude and set those the way it's expecting them for the geo within query. Save that off. Now when I do places.find fetch, we should see stuff. Yeah, we're seeing the objects again. So the next thing we need to do is start putting some markers on here. And so we can access the template instance here. And so we're just looking to see if there's data with line 15. If there is, we're going to loop over that data. So those are the places, the data context that we set in Iron Router. We're going to loop over those places, and then we're just going to call l.marker and give it all the necessary stuff to add it to the map. And then we just bind a pop-up to it with a place.name and a place.vicinity. Now when we come back over here, oh, I gotta save it. Reload, and boom, now we're getting points on the map. And so that's great, but we've only got 10 places. When we move the map around, that's not super interesting to us. So what we can do, we'll just the part that annoys me the most. I should refactor. We can put an on move end event right here. We'll just bind to it, and we'll basically reset the bottom left and top right, reset the location to be the coordinates that we got there, and then we're going to tell it to refetch. You know, we'll do a Meteor call to refetch new new locations as the map moves around. And so you can see, like, I only have the 10 places in the database, but now as the map moves, we've added a new one here. Move up here, go further, starting to get some places. Oh yeah, this is the place to go to restaurants, apparently. And so now when we look in the database again, you can see we've got 46 places in here. That kind of concludes that part. We've got 8 minutes. I will show you really quickly what the iOS stuff looks like. So we just do a Meteor Run Ios. And basically, it's going to build the Cordova application first. And then it's going to run the server. And so what's happening behind the scenes is we're connecting, the Cordova application is going to spin up. It's going to be using like the web view stuff. And it's going to connect back to the localhost 3000 Meteor app that we're running. But the Cordova app does have, like, the CSS is already there and the HTML templates are already there as part of the Cordova app. So you can see it said started app on iOS simulator, which is a very finicky thing. We'll see if it works. Sometimes I have to tell it to restart like 4 or 5 times. That's an iOS thing, not a Meteor issue. Any questions while we're waiting for it to work or not work? Yeah, I don't think it's gonna work here. Let's kill it. Try again. Here we go. It worked this time. So you can see when it pops here, it's asking me if it can use the location. We'll say allow. I think it's set to, yeah, it's set to Apple by default. So you can change that in the debug. You can say location, you know, city run, freeway drive, whatever you want to do. But, you know, it's working exactly the same as it was. You know, in our web browser. So we're kind of getting all that for free. All right. So how's the performance of Meteor and Cordova over something like Ionic or Titanium? That's a great question. I have no idea. I'm not even sure how to compare performances for native apps. I haven't done that yet. I haven't needed to, I guess. You can use Ionic with the Cordova stuff as far as the templating and whatnot goes, which is what I'm doing for a client now, and it seems to work fine. I haven't had any complaints. No one said, hey, this feels sluggish or anything like that. And then actually, let's kill that guy and see what happens. Oh, fail. I guess it can't go on the map. That's weird. No. Is there a good way to hook it up to test directly on your phone? Yeah, so what you can do there is rather than doing a Meteor Run Ios, you can do a Meteor Build Ios. And I think I've got to give it a path. Just call it Seaport build. Build. No, still don't like that. Yeah. Anyway, what that does is it actually builds the entire thing using Cordova. Sorry, got distracted there. And it spits out an actual Xcode project at that point. And so you can use that Xcode project. You can load it up in Xcode. You can run the simulator yourself. Let's say you need to simulate something other than the 4S, which I think is what it defaults to right now with Meteor when you're using Cordova. You can tell it you want to use an iPhone 6 if you need to, iPhone 6 Plus. And then you can even tell it to build and then ship to your phone if you want, if you've got all the developer keys set up and all that kind of stuff. Call it build. And so you can see it spits out an iOS project right here. If I open it, you can see the Xcode project right there. And you can start to dig into the whole thing. I'm not familiar with that. Oh, yeah. So this is interesting too. When you've got a simulator up by default, I don't know if people know this, but you can actually say, let's see, host 3000. You can go to the develop panel here and it says iOS simulator, and you can click on that simulator that's running and it runs a web inspector, so we can actually get a console right there for it, if that's kind of what you're talking about. You can call places.find.fetch. Obviously there's nothing there because I killed the server, but kind of get the idea.
All right. Well, it looks like we're about out of time. Is there anything else that you want us to see or anything else that people want to ask before we wrap this up?
Yeah, not a whole lot. I would just say, if you're interested in learning more, go to my blog and you can sign up for the newsletter and you'll get a welcome autoresponder. And feel free to email me and ask me any questions that you might have. This is what I do all day, every day, working with Meteor, and it's a passion of mine. So I would definitely say, hit me up if you want to learn more. Like, I can point you in the right direction. I've got a great getting started article as well on my blog that I posted 2 weeks ago. So it's a guest post, but great stuff. So, all right.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Josh. Make sure you go check out all of this stuff that he's got up here on the more slide. And yeah, definitely some stuff worth checking out.
Yeah.
Lots of thanks and applause in the chat room.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. It was fun.
All right. Well, we're going to go into presenter mode for a minute so John can get set up, and we'll be right back.